So the motivation behind our talk today is, you see a lot of talk about what the cost to companies and individuals of nation states conducting cyber operations against them. What we don't see as much is what it costs for an attacker to conduct these types of operations. So what we decided to do is see how much it would cost to outsource cyberwar. And while we know that nation states don't solely rely on open source tools, we're hoping that this can serve as a starting point for us to get an idea of the potential return on investment of what it would cost if we were to decide to outsource most, if not all, components of cyberwar.
Okay, so let's think about some of the reasons that criminals might outsource. So if you look at legitimate businesses, they outsource different parts of their operations all the time. One of these reasons is that it's not always cost effective to develop or to perform every single task yourself, especially when there's other businesses or organizations who can perform that task more quickly or already have the necessary infrastructure or resources in place. Additionally, the outsourcing of certain aspects of an operation can have a positive effect on speed. So if you are a threat actor and you need to get something up and running in a hurry, this can also help you. For example, if you don't have to develop the malware and spend the time to develop it from scratch, you can start using it more quickly. The same thing if you look at money mule networks. Those take a significant amount of time to develop, especially large ones. And so if you are or a threat actor or a nation state like, let's say, North Korea, and you want to outsource that to a service provider, you can do that more easily rather than spending the time to recruit and develop that network yourself. One additional point on this is that also if you are outsourcing or you're using pre-existing tools, that can also serve to muddy the water in terms of attribution as well. So whenever we are looking at or thinking about what the price is for different products, especially in the underground community, we want to think about what influences those prices, right? So if you go back to like basic Econ 101, you can think about this in terms of supply and demand and what factors would influence supply and demand. So when we look at supply, this might be the number of suppliers that are providing a particular good or service. That could lead to a shift in the price. Additionally, if there's a decrease in the cost of the resources or materials that it would take to create that product, that could decrease the price as well. And then also, if we want to look at demand and what can influence that, these might be things just based on consumer preferences. So maybe they have a preference for ransomware today, but maybe cryptocurrency tomorrow. Additionally, we might want to look at what other substitutes there are in the marketplace too in terms of pricing. So whenever we look at the underground economy, there's a couple important things to point out here as well. For example, when we look at prices, it's important to note that not all of the prices are going to be openly advertised and would require further engagement with a particular actor to determine that price. So when we're looking at this data, it's important to caveat that it's not complete data. Additionally, there's plenty of goods and services that aren't openly advertised at all, and so you would need to essentially know a particular individual or be a part of an elite group to know that they even exist to obtain them.
So the first case study that we're going to go through is Eternal Petya. Not Petya. I'm sure I don't have to go into details for that event for most of this audience, but as the story goes, in June 2017, it was widely reported that multiple organizations were hit with the variant of NotPetya ransomware that had a cell-spreading mechanism. The story unfolded, and it started at a Ukrainian company that had its update servers hijacked and used to distribute Eternal Petya and to all the machines that had the MEDOC software installed. After the initial infection, it was spread very rapidly and widely worldwide, and multiple companies were affected by it. The Eternal Petya was distributed via 2 exploits. It was Eternal Blue by shadow brokers, as well as publicly available Mimikatz, which was used for access, to gain access. Now, once it was spread, it affected these organizations for days and sometimes weeks.
So if we want to look at what might some of these things cost that were leveraged in this operation. So for the sake of simplicity, let's pretend that you are lazy and you don't want to spend the time to compromise an organization yourself. What could you do? You could easily go into any underground community and you could buy access to pretty much any type of organization that you might want to target. So to kind of give you an idea of the variability here, we looked at the prices that one particular actor has advertised over the course of our monitoring him. And we looked at what the average price was that he was selling access for different industries. So if you look at, in this case, at the top there, I know it's very small, but that is for financial services organizations. And he was selling, on average, access for $36,000 versus an educational organization, which was sold for an average under $2,000. So pricing can be highly variable. It could depend on the type of access that the attacker has, the industry, or the geography of a particular organization. Once you have that access, you may need to escalate privileges, again, depending on the level of access that the attacker already has achieved. And many of the tools that an experienced intrusion operator could use are available for, sometimes free or sometimes for a nominal cost. In the case of Eternal Petra, we know that the attackers leveraged source code that was available for ransomware. And we looked at ransomware source code that was available in various underground communities over the last 6 months and saw that these prices range anywhere from $0 to $3,000. In this case, they did do some modifications to that source code, but these exploits were already pretty widely available, so that wouldn't necessarily be an additional cost incurred to the threat actor, and would just largely depend on how much it costs in terms of labor to incorporate that into the source code.
So the next case study we're looking at is North Korea Nexus cyber espionage actors that have become pretty notorious for multiple bank heists and have also shown an increasing proclivity for using wiper malware. And what's really interesting here is that you have a nation-state actor that's using wiper malware for financial campaigns. Now, we believe that some of the reasons for using wiper malware to destroy the data is that they're trying to distract from the actual financial operation and make it harder for incident responders when going to that. Nevertheless, what we can see here is that in order to conduct this kind of operation, you could use a spear phishing kit to start to gain initial access, and then you could either use disruptive or destructive malware. If you're going to use destructive malware, you could use bootrec, which would destroy all the data on the local and attached hard disks. Or you could use MBR killer, which is merely disruptive in this sense. After that, you could also look at looking at using money mules to cash out for your operation.
So you wouldn't necessarily need all these, tools or services that we included up here, but to just highlight some for the sake of time, let's say you did want to send a spear phishing email and you wanted to use an exploit document. That price reflected there, just under $1,200, is associated with a very popular exploit document builder that's offered in various underground communities by an actor named Mr. Bass. We've also seen North Korea use various backdoors and rats. Those can range anywhere from $0 to $950, depending if you want to use a free cracked version or not. And then just one other one that I wanted to highlight on this slide was the cost of a money mule network. Generally, this is going to be based on a proportion of the amount that is being cashed out. And so this is going to be probably the most expensive thing to outsource for somebody who is financially motivated, since the money mule operator would collect 45 to 60% of the profits.
The last example we're going to use, I'll make it quick, we're looking at influence operations. And we've seen that in the last few years, there's been a lot more use of such operations in the cyber realm. More recently, we've seen Iran and Russia Nexus campaigns. And what they've been doing is they're targeting geopolitical events and focusing on elections, dissident activity, but not limited to that, and exploiting it and amplifying those events through social media. And some of the ways that this is done is through inauthentic websites that are promoted on social media account. The way that this can be done is through amplifying that information and that message through the purchasing of likes and retweets and verified accounts.
Yeah, so these prices here are reflective, not based on what we've seen in the underground, because a lot of these are actually available via the open web, and so these prices are reflective of what it would cost, so $20 for 1,000 followers, $37 for 1,000 retweets, that sort of thing. We also looked at the hosting provider that the Iranian was used in a recent Iranian IO campaign. In that case, the domain registrations advertised for $10 and then an additional fee for hosting each month.
And all in all, when you look at this and you compare the cost, what does stand out is that in cyber war, it's not as expensive as traditional war. There are no guns, there are no tanks, there are no fighter jets, but there's malware, exploits, and retweets.